All right, well, good morning again. Quickly, Sister Lee online, she's like, listen, Rich, your class has been great, but you haven't done a recap.
She did not.
Oh, yeah. No, she actually says the opposite. But so just, again, we talked about Paul and kind of that relationship that he had with the brothers and sisters, right? We looked at the persecution that the early day brothers and sisters went through. We looked at that relationship and that dynamic between Paul and the Jewish brethren that he really had persecuted, and most likely in some instances had killed family members, thrown them in jail. Wasn't a great time. And so that transition from, Saul, the enforcer of Judaism, to Paul the apostle, wasn't necessarily a smooth one, right? It actually took some time to build relationships with people and also to kind of put some of those things in the past. Now, whether or not, everyone kind of accepted Paul, we're not told. But in general, eventually Paul is going to be accepted into the community of early day Christians, which is a great thing, and also I think speaks to this idea of repentance, about forgiveness is a big one, and second chances as well. Think about all the things that Saul had done to the early day Christians, and now here he is amongst the people. So very early on, despite the persecution, Christianity is going to grow relatively quickly in Israel, but also north of Israel, primarily up in Antioch, which is in modern-day Turkey. Asia Minor is going to be kind of a hotbed of Paul and preaching the preaching of the gospel, and it's going to take hold very quickly, particularly in Antioch, because that's where Antioch is where they're going to originally be called Christians for the first time, and Acts tells us that. And just one aside as well before we kind of get into some new material. Christianity primarily is going to be an urban religion. And so when I say an urban religion, and we'll look at this as we go on, it's going to start in the cities. And it's going to start in the cities because, number one, that's where most of the people lived in the ancient world, right? And then number two, this is where the Jewish synagogues were. And so in all of these cities, as we're going to see, Paul is going to use the synagogues that have already been established throughout Asia Minor and also throughout the Mediterranean world. And he's going to use these places as a jumping off point to spread the gospel first in the synagogues, but then to other places as well. So any questions, comments on that aspect before we go on to new material? All right. So with this spreading of the gospel, again, things didn't, things did go smoothly for a while, right? And there was great rejoicing. And if we look at Acts as well, we know that, all the people came together, these early believers. They're going to have all things common. In other words, those people that had a little extra, they kind of put it in the pot, and everybody is going to have enough to kind of get by. They're going to share their resources and share their wealth. Now remember, primarily now, and there are exceptions to this, and Scripture tells us this, but primarily Christianity is going to take hold in some of the poorer communities, okay? It's going to take hold in these poorer communities that are looking for hope, that are looking for something better than their life that they had right now. They were looking for a sense of community. They were looking for a relationship with other people in order to help them through some of these trying times. And if we notice, that's one of the very first things. And let's see if I can find this here. Let's see. I want to say Acts. Yeah, Acts 4. It's talking about Barnabas. Well, actually, let's see, in verse 33, and with great power gave the apostles witness of the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great grace was upon them all. Neither was there any among them that lacked. Now, I think sometimes, brothers and sisters, we can kind of go through some of these verses without really digesting exactly what it's saying there. So, neither was there any among them that lacked, for as many as were possessors of land or houses sold them and brought the price of the things that were sold. And it talks about Barnabas as well. He had land, he sold it, and brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet. And this is actually going to kind of set up the scene, right, with Peter and Ananias and Sapphira, who, to make a show, they said, look, we sold our land for a certain amount of money, but they really didn't. They kind of pocketed it a little bit, which, Peter says, just tell us, why are you lying to everybody? Anyways, the wealthier people, the wealthier brothers and sisters, use their resources to help the poor. And so, that little verse 34, that part of the verse, neither was there any among them that lacked. So think about, when we think about poverty now, in this day and age, poverty in this day and age was completely different than poverty. Like American poverty compared to ancient poverty, completely different, right? When you were poor and destitute in the ancient world, sometimes you didn't even have any clothes. Okay, that's real. Like you had people that barely had, if they had some type of covering, it was ripped or it's torn. They're begging, going from place to place. Just real poverty. And I don't think we witness a lot of that in this country. I don't think we do at all, right? Say again?
There was no social network.
Thank you, Steve. Brother Steve in the back said that there was no social network. And that's actually, there was no real safety net in the ancient world, right? You had to rely on your neighbors. You had to rely on other people to kind of keep you going. I think we talked about this last time about the widow that Jesus saw, and he had compassion on this widow because she was going to be destitute, right? Because there was no one to take care of her. And so when we read a verse in Scripture that early day brothers and sisters took all of their wealth and pooled it together to help some of these people, that's a real powerful statement. So we already see that Christianity is taking hold because there is a sense of community, number one. But that sense of community is rooted in helping those that were less fortunate. And I'm not saying that, in the ancient world, in the Greek and Roman world, that, there weren't good, kind people that actually helped other people. But the early day Christians really emphasized this. It's one of the very first things that they did was to set up some type of mechanism to help those that were poor, that needed help. What was one of the first disagreements that the early day Christians had, the early day brothers and sisters? What was the first disagreement that they had? Jim Sullivan, Brother Jim.
Distributing the money.
Ah, very good. Distributing the money to whom?
To either the Hebrews or the Greeks.
Okay, so very good. So Brother Jim Sullivan just gave the right answer. The right answer is that they were having a dispute over who got what money, right, to help the poor widows. Okay, and so there was, why are you giving this much money to the to the Hebrew women? The Greek widows are not being taken care of, right? And so there was a dissension among them, and so they eventually resolved it. And kind of things went on from there. But I guess what I'm trying to say is one of the basic foundational tenets of early day Christianity was helping your neighbor, right? Particularly those of the household of faith. Paul says that as well, right? Do good to all men, particularly those of the household of faith. And so that is a living testament to the faith of these individuals. Remember as well, brothers and sisters, that a lot of the Jewish brothers and sisters, right? What happened to a lot of these brothers and sisters when they took on the saving name of Jesus? Did everyone say, "Hey, that's great, nice job"?
They were excommunicated.
Brother Steve from the back, he answered correctly. They were excommunicated, right? They were kicked out of the synagogue, right? And so that just doesn't mean every, Friday night and Saturday they couldn't come and see all their friends and their family. That means they were out. They were ostracized or kicked out of society, right? And so that's another reason why they needed some type of, social safety net within the confines of the early day ecclesia. So I just found that very interesting, right? So this idea of there's one dispute that they had with, the keeping of the widows, making sure that the money was fairly distributed to everybody. But there's also going to be, I think, something, a dispute that is going to be even more, I don't want to say, destructive is probably not the word. But there was a real problem within the ranks of the brothers and sisters in early Christianity, and it was about this. And let's turn to the 15th chapter of Acts. Now, this is going to take place, after Paul and Paul is going to have his conversion. There's going to be some years in between there as well. Remember, Peter is going to have the vision of Cornelius, right? Let's just remind ourselves of this. He's not going to have the vision of Cornelius. He's going to have a vision of the sheet coming down from heaven with all of the unclean animals in it. Let's see. Early on. Blah, blah. Not it. Oh yeah, Acts 10. Now, just a couple things here. Cornelius was a centurion. So, a centurion was the head guy over 100 or so men, the backbone of the Roman army, right? He was a devout man and one that feared God with all his house, which gave much alms to the people and prayed to God always. He's going to see a vision about the 9th hour of the day, an angel of God coming to him and saying unto him, Cornelius. Okay, what's the 9th hour of the day, by the way? Say again, Brother Jim?
3 in the afternoon.
Okay, 3 in the afternoon. What does that tell us?
Don't I get credit?
Brother Jim in the front, second row just answered correctly. 3 p.m. So what was Cornelius doing, by the way? I think this is very important. Okay, that's right. He was praying, right? Thank you, Jim. Very good. So he was praying, prayed to God, and he had a vision about at 3 o'clock in the day, an angel of God coming to him and saying unto him, Cornelius, right? And so this is going to be the beginning of not only Paul. Paul is going to be primarily a preacher to the Gentiles, but Peter's going to be involved in this as well. He is now going to a Roman centurion, and he's going to preach the gospel to him. But before, Peter's going to have a vision, right? And as he's going to say in verse 13, there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. And Peter says, No, Lord, I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. And so God is sending the message here that number one, the dietary restrictions are going to go out the window very soon, and we're going to see that, right? And then number two, the gospel message isn't just going to be preached to the Jews. This gospel message now is going to be taken to the Gentiles as well. And that was something very important that Peter had to learn, because he's still going to be struggling with this, isn't he? Paul's going to bring it up in Galatians, that Peter's still going to be struggling about, who do I eat with? What's my relationship with the Jewish brethren? What's my relationship now with the Gentile brethren? Peter struggled with it, and I think a lot of early day brothers and sisters struggled with it as well. But just one comment on Cornelius. A lot of times, these Roman soldiers and centurions, right? They had to be, I believe in the Roman army, they had to put in 25 years of service, okay? 25 years of service. If they lived, which, A lot of them didn't, particularly if they were in an active army that was always fighting the barbarians and stuff like that. If they lived, they got a plot of land someplace, some land, and they were given a pension as well. That's pretty good, right? So the Romans had a pension system, particularly for those in the army, and they were given a certain amount of money. It wasn't a lot. They were expected, obviously, to farm their land and whatnot. Anyways, a lot of these centurions, these Romans, they're going to live in these areas. They're going to take wives of the areas, right? And they're going to have children, and so they're going to become really part of the community. And I think this. I think this is a good example of that happening. And this is going to happen all over the Roman world, that these Roman soldiers are going to integrate themselves into the particular society and the particular culture that they were that they were living in and overseeing. And I think Cornelius fits that bill. Anyways, Cornelius is going to be the first Gentile that's going to accept the gospel message of Christ. Okay? Now, internally. Now remember, we talked about some external pressures that are happening, particularly by Saul before his conversion, right? They're being persecuted, they're being hunted down, they're being killed. Stephen is going to be stoned to death in front of Saul. So there's a tremendous amount of not only friction, but of persecution that is going to happen to these early brothers and sisters. This is not going to stop them, right? Because what does Acts tell us? That it says Paul he's going to these different cities, and he's looking to throw the early day Christians into prison, kill them, that type of thing. But what does the Bible tell us? What does Acts tell us that happened? Did Saul just wipe everything out and that's the end of the story? Obviously not. Yes, Jim.
They went and preached the gospel.
Okay, very good. Jim answered again. This is two answers in a row that are correct for Jim Sullivan. Yeah, so as they were persecuted, they didn't keep their mouths closed, right? Yeah, that's true. Right. Wherever they went, they preached the gospel. Again, faith in action. So, do we see the faith of these early day brothers and sisters? I think it's wonderful, right? And we owe obviously a lot, the fact that the gospel message has survived for 2,000 years, right? And we had it. Despite all of the stuff that kind of Christianity has gone through, we've got it, right? And we've got the Bible, and we've got this wonderful hope. And we should, and hopefully we can thank these early day brothers and sisters in person, right? Give them a nice big hug, like, hey, thanks for being so faithful. Thanks for, not keeping your mouth shut about the gospel message of hope. Thanks for preaching it to everybody. Because they had a choice, didn't they, brothers and sisters? They could have just said, hey, it's too much. I can't, I got too much to worry about now. I just converted to this new religion, this cult, this sect, and now I'm being persecuted. My family's being hunted down. You know what? I'm out. But they didn't do that. So I think that's wonderful. Wonderful exhortation to us, brothers and sisters. Okay, Acts 15. So, external issues. Now we have internal issues or internal friction or disagreements that were going on. All right, verse 1. And certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren and said, except you are circumcised after the manner of Moses, you cannot be saved. Whoa. Right? You had individuals. Okay, so just keep that in mind. We'll talk about this. Verse 6. And there rose up certain of the sect of the Pharisees which believed. Interesting. Saying that it was needful to circumcise them and to command them to keep the law of Moses. Whoa. Yeah, this is kind of an issue, isn't it? Right? So a couple things. Number one, there were Pharisees, right, that had converted to Christianity. Wow. They were baptized, right? They became a brother and sister of Christ. Now remember, the last few kind of interactions that Jesus had with the Pharisees, not so great, right? Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, right? And he keeps going on and on and on. But there were Pharisees that were believers. And we know this, right? We know that Joseph of Arimathea was a believer. Nicodemus was a believer as well. There certainly were other leaders that also took on the saving name of Christ. But these Pharisees were so steeped in the law that they were preaching, they were telling, they were teaching early day brothers and sisters that not only did they have to be circumcised, but they had to keep the whole law of Moses, right? That's an issue. I'll tell you this right now, it's a major issue if you are going to preach to the Greek and Roman world and you're going to tell grown men that, hey guys, by the way, you're going to have to, you're going to have to be circumcised. The Romans and Greeks are like, nope, no thanks. They're not going to do it. And it's a little bit humorous, but we have to remember that you want to talk about a stumbling block to Christ. You want to talk about a practice that would prevent the gospel message from being spread throughout the whole world, and that was one of them, right? And so, that's a major issue, because if they didn't resolve that, if they said, hey, look, yeah, we've got to, we're followers of Christ, but we're still going to, follow the law of Moses in its entirety, you're going to remain very, very, very small. Because not only is there circumcision, but think about the dietary restrictions in the law. Just look at those two things, circumcision and dietary restrictions of the law. Well, yeah, so Jim said no bacon, right? Yes, that's exactly. And so just remember this, Jim, as well. Particularly the Romans. The Romans had a pretty steady diet of pork, right? They enjoyed pig, just like the majority of the people in the world today. And so dietary restrictions are going to be, a major hurdle that they're going to have to overcome. And so if you take those two things away, you take away the law of Moses and the rituals, now you have a pathway to spread the gospel message to the Roman world. But it wasn't easy. Brother Jim Boyko, question.
Yeah, just from the perspective of the Jews changing how they operated every day as now believers, you have to imagine, I know when things change for me, I'm not excited about it. It takes a long time for things to
Yeah.
come from, I'm going to do it this way versus I'm going to do it that way.
Yeah.
I remember when we wanted to get a loan for the house and we went to a mortgage company instead of a bank, my parents went crazy.
Yeah.
They thought I was a lunatic. But anyway, the point is change is difficult for people. And this was there every single day.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a morning sacrifice and an evening
Yes.
sacrifice. They rested on Saturday. They did this,
Yeah.
that, and the other. And to change, I mean, it was the fiber of their being.
Yes. Yeah.
So, in the things that we say, we read these passages, and the Jews are going to give up the law. Are you kidding me?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. No, it's a great point, Jim. And for those of you that maybe didn't hear, Jim was saying that change is hard. So just imagine, I'm paraphrasing here, Jim, but just imagine a Jewish brother, right? And he's like, I have to give away all of the law. Jim was saying that it's really, their whole identity was tied up with the law of Moses, right? The rituals of that, the sacrifices, the going to the temple, all of that stuff. This is what made me Jewish. This is my identity. And you want me to take it away? So you can understand, you can empathize. You can empathize with these early day brothers and sisters, right? These Jewish brothers and sisters. It's all got to go? Oh, well, what am I going to do, right? All my boundaries have been taken away. And so verse 2, and when Paul and Barnabas had no small dissension and disputation with them, they determined that Paul and Barnabas and certain other of them should go up to Jerusalem unto the apostles and elders about these questions. So it's going to be Paul and Barnabas that are going to go up there, and they're really going to push that, hey, we can't tell these people to keep the law. And there's going to be great arguments. This is going to take a while. There's going to be a lot of internal fighting about what what things we're going to keep, what things we're not going to keep. And so, they rose up a certain of the sect of the Pharisees. They came together. Verse 7, and when there had been much disputing, right? I wonder, again, that's one of a little sentence that we just read and go over, but much disputing, it really would be something if we could go and kind of hear the back and forth about this. That'd be great. Peter rose up. Again, here's Peter kind of taking on a leadership role now, which is interesting, right? Men and brethren, ye know how that a good while ago God made choice among us that the Gentiles by my mouth should hear the word of the gospel and believe. Okay, so Peter is acknowledging that this just isn't going to be a Jewish movement. It's going to be a worldwide movement. And so the Gentiles now have heard the gospel, Peter is saying, right? And so, let's see. In verse 9, and put no difference between us and them, purifying their hearts by faith. Now, therefore, why tempt ye God to put a yoke upon the neck of the disciples, which neither our fathers nor we were able to bear? That's a great statement. That's some great insight. It's a great argument. Why are we going to put a yoke or a burden on these new brothers and sisters, a burden that we couldn't bear ourselves or our fathers? That's a historical fact. And so, Peter, in his argument, is going to kind of win the day. Verse 12, then all the multitude kept silence and gave audience to Barnabas and Paul, declaring what miracles and wonders God had wrought among the Gentiles by them. So that's interesting, brothers and sisters, because while this is going on in Jerusalem and in Israel primarily, this struggle about the law, Paul and Barnabas have already been preaching, particularly up in modern-day Turkey and Asia Minor. They're preaching the gospel. And so they come back with this wonderful report like, yeah, we start off at the synagogues, but then we're doing all of these miracles, and all of these Gentiles are taking on the name of Christ. And so, okay, so that gives people pause. That gave the apostles pause, like, ooh, maybe God does have a plan in all this. Maybe this does make sense. Let's see. So verse 19. So James actually is going to kind of make the final pronouncement on this thing. Like, what are we going to do? And so he goes through a lot of different things. Verse 14. Simon hath declared how God at the first did visit the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. So that's really the foundation right there. God, his plan is to go out into the Gentiles to spread the gospel message, to pull out or to take up on him a name from for people to take on his name. Wherefore, verse 19, wherefore my sentence is that we trouble not them which are from among the Gentiles are turned to God, but that we write unto them that they abstain from pollution of idols and from fornication and from things strangled and from blood. And so that's going to be the pronouncement. So those are the things, the pronouncement here is interesting because they weren't, the prohibition upon, fornication, right, number one. Number two, there was, you couldn't eat things strangled, right? But also you couldn't eat meat that was offered unto idols. Now, if we look at 1 Corinthians, what does Paul say about that? What does Paul say about the eating of meat offered unto idols? It was prohibited here at the Jerusalem Council. Well, what does Paul say?
Meat is meat.
Meat is meat. Like, right, thank you. That's 3 for 3?
That's 3.
Unbelievable. So, he's saying, listen, as long as you give thanks for it, there isn't a problem. But here, it was prohibited. I have some thoughts on this, but anybody have any thoughts?
Was it a regional thing, do you think?
So, Brother Steve in the back asked a great question. Was it a regional thing? And that would be my answer. Yes, it was definitely a regional thing, particularly that, and And I think they had in mind kind of not offending the large population of Jews that obviously lived in Jerusalem and in Israel. And so there was those restrictions, and those would work fine within Israel and within Jerusalem. But the fact of the matter is, if you got outside of Jerusalem, all of the meat is in some way going to be sacrificed unto idols. And Paul recognizes that. So it wouldn't necessarily be practical to have, brothers and sisters in Corinth not being able to eat meat that were offered unto idols. Well, that would be impossible to do because everything was offered unto an idol in some way, shape, or form. So I believe it was a regional thing. And as they went out from Jerusalem and from Judea, there was a practical aspect around these things. Questions, comments on that? Yes, Jim Sullivan.
It's interesting. I think this also speaks to the fact that at this Jerusalem Council, there was a concession, so to speak, to the concerns of those Pharisaical Jews. They were concerned that, hey, if you eat meat to idols, then we're doing something that is not so much against the law as against the principles of the law.
Yes.
And rather than them just coming out, Paul in all of his great letters explains what's wrong with that thinking. But it wasn't like day one they said, okay, they told the Gentiles don't do this, that, and the other thing. But notice they didn't say to the Jews back home, you can't keep Passover.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
yes.
I think one of the things going on in that first century is a period of adjustment.
Yes.
To this new thing. And nobody was making it a hard and fast rule on day one.
Yeah. No. Great point, Jim. So just if you didn't hear what Jim said, I'm just paraphrasing, but there was a concession. Jim is saying that there was a concession made to some of the Pharisees about these things as well. They didn't kind of just jump into things on day one. Things had to evolve a little bit to see where things were going. Along those same lines too, remember the temple is still around. The temple and everything associated with the temple is still going to be there. The Jews are living in Jerusalem. They control Jerusalem. But after AD 70, that whole dynamic is going to change, right? The temple is going to be burnt with fire. Titus is going to come in there, pretty much level the city. There's going to be brutality everywhere. Hundreds of thousands of people in and around this area are going to be taken captive or killed. And so now that whole kind of structure in Jewish culture is going to be gone. There's no more temple. And this is really going to open up the door to the spread of the gospel message to other places. Okay. Let's see. We've got about 10 minutes. Let's do this. Where is my mouse? Can't see my mouse. There it is. Okay, I got it. All right. Okay. Here we go. I just want to talk a little bit about synagogues in the Roman world, okay? Because, God in His wisdom, if you look at this whole thing, God in His wisdom, it's one of these things where, well, why did this happen? Why didn't that happen? And we have 20/20 hindsight. We can kind of look back on things and go, oh, that makes sense now. But when you're living through it, sometimes things don't make sense. If Christ remains away and we look back on this time, in American history, right? 5-10 years from now, when we look back, we're going to have a much better perspective on things, right? Right now, we're in the middle of it. We're in the weeds, so to speak, and so you can't really, everyone's got an opinion on what to do, what not to do, who did it. There's a lot of politics involved in it. Anyways, so if it wasn't for the Jews being scattered, first by the Babylonians. Well, first, they were in Israel, people, the Assyrians, but also the Babylonians. There is going to be a diaspora, okay? In other words, Jews are going to move to other cities, either by choice or they're going to be forced to move there. every single one of the cities that Paul and Barnabas go to, what do they have?
Synagogue.
Synagogues. 4 for 4, Jim Sullivan. They're going to have synagogues. And Paul is going, Barnabas primarily are going to use the synagogues as, a place, it's kind of, ground zero, I guess, all right, their base of operations. And so, I'll give you an example. In Alexandria, right, which is on the coast of Egypt, the Jewish community there was well established, and there were more Jews living in Alexandria than they were in all of Israel. Okay? And so, just like now, Jews live in, a lot of different places now across the world, right? And the same was true in the ancient world today. And so,
Rich,
yes, Brother Steve.
do you have any thoughts on how it was that a visiting speaker could show up at a synagogue and get in front of an audience?
So the question by Brother Steve was, how a visiting speaker or a visiting teacher could go into a synagogue and just kind of speak. I believe, Brother Steve, that it was a traditional thing that, I think in one case, and I can't bring it to mind, but I think the rabbi or the leader of the synagogue asked the people, asked the brethren there, does anybody have any words of encouragement that they would like to speak to the people about?
Because Jesus spoke, right? He found
Yes.
the scroll in Isaiah. And
Yes.
like that, right?
Right.
So that
I-
seems to...
It seems to be a traditional thing where if you were a visitor and wanted to speak, you were allowed to speak. However, I think it's one of these things, right, Brother Steve, where if the people in the synagogue didn't like the message, you were going to know about it pretty quick, right? Because, Jesus is going to be, he's going to be run out of that synagogue and almost stoned. Paul is going to be stoned numerous times as well. So you could speak, but there would be negative consequences if the people in the synagogue didn't like that message. And that happened a few times, unfortunately, to Paul and to Barnabas, right?
Won't happen
No. Well, here's the thing. I mean, they're right. You can. I guess if there was a brother that came into our meeting and we didn't really know him, and he's like, hey, I've got an exhortation, you mind? And then you go up there and you're like, whoa, what's this guy talking about, right? That would be interesting, right? To have somebody, hey, yeah, I'm a brother from Surrey, England, or is that even a place? Yeah, sure. Hello, I would like to give an exhortation. Is that all right? And then we got problems afterwards. So okay, let's take a look at the 13th chapter of Acts. We're not going to go through all of these, but look at they are listed up there, right? All the different places that had a synagogue. Salamis, Acts 13. A little bit of knowledge for you. A great battle took place on the island of Salamis, right, between the Greek forces and the Persian forces. In a great naval battle, Greece is going to win, and that's really going to stop the Persians from coming into Europe. Just a little history nerd action for you. All right. Settle down, nerd. All right. Acts 13:5. Now, there were in the ecclesia that was at Barnabas certain prophets and teachers. Barnabas, and he kind of lists all the different names. And when they were at Salamis, they preached the word of God in the synagogues of the Jews, and they had also John to their minister. So, anyways, I guess that's what they went into the synagogue and preached to the Jews about Jesus, right? Same thing in Antioch. If you look at verse 14, and when they departed from Perga, they came to Antioch in Pisidia, and went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and sat down. Steve, here it is. And after the reading of the law and the prophets, the rulers of the synagogue sent unto them, saying, Ye men and brethren, if ye have any word of exhortation for the people, say on. Then Paul stood up and beckoned with his hand and said, Men of Israel, and ye that fear God, give audience. So there was an opportunity for people to speak. Now,
Where was that? That's
this is Acts 13, verse 14 through 16. Yep, no problem. And so Paul is going to take this opportunity to preach. Now, there's a couple things here. Number one, it's the synagogue. He goes in on the Sabbath day, right? And he's preaching on the Sabbath day. Makes sense. That's when the Jews came together. But there's two groups of people here, brothers and sisters, that if we just kind of, read very quickly, we miss this. There's two groups of people in the synagogue, by the way. Okay? Verse 15, the ruler of the synagogue is going to say, Ye men and brethren, okay? If ye have any word of exhortation for the people, say on. Paul is going to say, when he stands up, he says, Men of Israel, and you that fear God, give audience. So there were two people. There were the Jews, but there were also Gentiles that feared God but didn't convert to Judaism. Huh.
wonder why.
I wonder why, Brother Steve. Do you think that maybe these Gentiles that were drawn to the monotheistic theology of the Jews, and just the theology in general of the Jewish people, right? Maybe they had family relations. There was, who knows? Anyways, there were non-Jews in the audience in the synagogue at this time. But what I'm saying is that these Gentiles that had an affinity for the Jewish people, had relationships with the Jewish people, they didn't convert to Judaism because of the law of Moses, because of the things that they would have to do in order to become a member of the synagogue. They would have to be circumcised. They would have to keep the law and all the dietary rituals and everything else associated with it. And a lot of them just didn't want to do it. It was just too much. I'm not doing that. But I love what you have to say. And so with that taken away, now when Paul and Barnabas go there and they say, hey, look, we have the law and the prophets and everything else, but you don't have to be circumcised. You don't have to follow the law anymore. Yeah, I'm going to preach to you about the Son of God, Jesus Christ. He did away with the law, baptized into his saving name. It's a totally different dynamic now that Paul is going to use. And he's going to use this in all of the different places. Just one last thing. We're running out of time. If we turn to Galatians, where we kind of started this whole thing a few weeks back. Galatians. Let's see. Yeah, I can't. Where is it now? Oh, brethren, with me in Galatia. I can't find it right now. I'm going to. Well, Paul, when he gives his greeting, he is going to use the term, to the 12 tribes of Israel. Is it this or in James? I don't know. I can't find it. Anyways, but he's going to not only send a greeting to the Jews that were there, but also to the Gentiles as well, right? And so Paul is kind of incorporating everybody, and it's not, he's not just writing an epistle to the Jewish brethren. He's writing it to the Greek, to the Gentiles as well. So, all right. Questions, comments? So let's just tie this all together. Let's just look at Acts, the 28th chapter. And so we know, kind of look at Acts, we know all of the things that Paul went through, right, to preach the gospel. So he is going to be under house arrest. Now that, you don't really understand something until you live it. Now, granted, I think my house arrest that we're going through, we're kind of going through house arrest right now, right? But Paul, I think, Paul had his own house. He had a soldier there, of course. He had some liberty. He could have people come and go. He could preach. He couldn't leave the grounds of the house, though, right? So anyways, verse 20. For this cause, therefore, have I called for you to see you and to speak with you, because that for the hope of Israel I am bound with this chain. And so Paul was literally bound with the chain. He was in chains, in house arrest, obviously, but he was in chains for what? For the hope of Israel. And so Paul, even though, he's spreading the gospel message to all the, to the Greeks and to the Romans and to the other Gentiles, he still understood that it was the hope of Israel. That the preaching of the gospel message and Jesus and the gospel was not just a Jewish hope. It was a worldwide hope, incorporated into the salvation of Israel. Those promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The promises made to David. The promise of a Savior to come. And that's what Paul was preaching.